Sarah Martinez was taking out the recycling on a quiet Thursday afternoon when something metallic caught the sunlight deep inside the school dumpster. Curious, she climbed in and found an old, tarnished metal tangled in a crumpled plastic bag. At first glance, it looked like forgotten junk, something a careless student had tossed away without a second thought. She brought it into her classroom, intending to toss it later, but something about the metal felt different. It wasn't just a shiny trinket. It carried history, stories of sacrifice, and a weight far heavier than its worn surface suggested. For weeks, it sat on her desk, a silent mystery begging to be solved. Then, out of the blue, her phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm but commanding. "This is Colonel James Patterson from the Pentagon." Suddenly, Sarah realized she wasn't holding a forgotten piece of metal. She was holding a key to a story that could change lives and reconnect a forgotten hero with the nation they served. What started as a simple act of curiosity would soon reveal a hidden chapter of valor, honor, and the unexpected way the past can reach out to touch the present. Welcome to the Silent Ranks. Before we dive into this incredible discovery, tell us in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today. And if you believe in the power of preserving history and honoring forgotten heroes, please hit that subscribe button to join our growing community of storytellers. Roosevelt Elementary School sat on the corner of Oak and 3rd Street in a small Ohio town where 3 generations of families had attended the same classrooms, walked the same hallways, and learned from teachers who genuinely cared about their futures. The building was old but well-maintained, with tall windows that let in streams of afternoon light and wooden floors that creaked with the accumulated weight of decades of childhood footsteps. It was the kind of school where everyone knew everyone, where teachers stayed for entire careers, and where the annual Christmas pageant still drew standing room-only crowds. Sarah Martinez had been teaching 5th grade at Roosevelt for 12 years. At 34, she had the kind of energy and enthusiasm that made her students actually look forward to history lessons, even when they covered topics that seemed impossibly distant from their modern lives. Sarah had grown up in the same town, attended Roosevelt herself as a child, and returned after college with a passionate belief that education could change lives if teachers were willing to make learning feel real and relevant. She was not particularly tall, with shoulder-length black hair that she usually wore pulled back in a practical ponytail, and dark eyes that lit up when she got excited about a lesson. Sarah dressed simply but professionally, favoring comfortable clothes that wouldn't be ruined by art projects or science experiments. She had a laugh that could be heard from 3 classrooms away, and a way of making even the most reluctant students feel like their questions mattered. The metal incident happened during the last week of October, on one of those crisp autumn afternoons when the Ohio sky was perfectly blue and the maple trees around the school had turned brilliant shades of red and gold. Sarah had stayed late to finish grading spelling tests and preparing materials for the next day's lesson on World War II. She always tried to make history come alive for her students, bringing in artifacts, old photographs, and personal stories whenever possible. As she was leaving the building, Sarah noticed that the recycling bin in her classroom was overflowing. The janitor had mentioned that pickup was scheduled for early the next morning, so she decided to take the extra bags out to the dumpster behind the school. It was a mundane task, the kind of small responsibility that teachers handle without thinking, but as she lifted the recycling bags into the large metal container, something caught her eye. Wedged between a stack of old worksheets and an empty cardboard box was what appeared to be a small metal object. At first glance, it looked like costume jewelry or perhaps a cheap souvenir, the kind of thing that might fall out of a student's backpack without being missed. But something about its weight and the way it reflected the late afternoon sun made Sarah curious enough to fish it out of the dumpster. The metal was roughly circular, about the size of a silver dollar, suspended from a faded ribbon that had once been red, white, and blue, but was now mostly gray with age and exposure. The metal itself was heavily tarnished, dark with decades of oxidation that obscured whatever design or inscription it might once have displayed. Sarah could make out what looked like raised lettering around the edge and some kind of central figure, but the details were impossible to discern without cleaning. Her first instinct was to throw it back into the dumpster. It was clearly old, probably worthless, and definitely not something that belonged to her. But Sarah had always been curious about historical artifacts, and something about the metal's weight and construction suggested it might be more significant than its appearance indicated. She slipped it into her jacket pocket, planning to clean it up and perhaps use it as a teaching prop if it turned out to be interesting. That evening, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with a soft cloth and some gentle metal polish, carefully working to remove decades of tarnish from the metal's surface. As the oxidation came away, details began to emerge that made her increasingly excited. The central figure appeared to be a classical representation of victory or liberty, and the lettering around the edge, while still difficult to read, looked official and important. After an hour of careful cleaning, Sarah could make out enough details to attempt some research. She took several high-resolution photographs of the metal from different angles, then settled down at her laptop to begin what she assumed would be a brief internet search. What she discovered over the next several hours would keep her up until well past midnight. The metal was not costume jewelry or a cheap replica. Based on its design, weight, and construction, it appeared to be a genuine military decoration from World War II. The central figure was indeed Liberty, and the partially visible text around the edge included words like United States and what might have been Distinguished Service. Sarah's heart began to race as she realized she might be holding a real piece of American military history. But identifying the type of metal was only the beginning. Sarah became obsessed with learning more about its origins. Who had earned it? How had it ended up in a school dumpster in small-town Ohio? Was there a family somewhere who might be looking for a lost piece of their heritage? The questions multiplied faster than the answers, and Sarah found herself drawn into a research project that would consume her free time for weeks. She started by photographing the metal from every possible angle, using her phone's macro lens to capture details that weren't visible to the naked eye. She researched military decoration databases, contacted local historical societies, and even reached out to veterans organizations in the area. The metal appeared to be authentic, but without being able to read all of the inscription clearly, she couldn't determine its exact significance or origin. Sarah's students began to notice their teachers' newfound fascination with military history. She incorporated more World War II content into their social studies lessons, showing them photographs of different medals and decorations, explaining how they were earned and what they represented. She was careful not to mention her own discovery, not wanting to get the children's hopes up about something that might turn out to be insignificant, but her enthusiasm was contagious. 2 weeks after finding the medal, Sarah decided to take a more systematic approach to her research. She contacted the Ohio Historical Society, uploaded high-resolution photos to military collector forums, and even reached out to the National Archives to see if they could provide any guidance. Most of her inquiries went unanswered or resulted in generic responses about the difficulty of identifying metals without clear provenance. But one response was different. A military historian at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, about an hour from Sarah's town, expressed interest in seeing the medal in person. Dr. Robert Chun had spent 30 years studying World War II decorations and had connections throughout the military history community. He invited Sarah to bring the medal to his office for a proper examination. The meeting took place on a Friday afternoon in early November. Dr. Chin's office was filled with books, photographs, and display cases containing various military artifacts. He was a slight man in his 60s with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses, but his eyes lit up with genuine excitement when Sarah carefully unwrapped the medal and placed it on his desk. Dr. Chun examined the medal under a magnifying glass for several minutes, occasionally making small sounds of interest or surprise. He measured its dimensions, weighed it on a precise scale, and compared its design to reference books and photographs. Finally, he sat back in his chair and looked at Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Ms. Martinez," he said slowly, "where exactly did you say you found this?" Sarah explained about the dumpster behind her school, about her decision to clean it up and research its origins. Dr. Chin listened carefully, taking notes and asking detailed questions about the exact location and circumstances of her discovery. "This metal," Dr. Chin said finally, "is not just authentic. It's extraordinarily rare. Based on the design, manufacturing marks, and construction, I believe this is a Distinguished Service Cross from World War II. Only about 13,000 of these were awarded during the entire war, and very few survive in private hands." Sarah felt her heart begin to race. The Distinguished Service Cross was the second highest military decoration for valor awarded only for extraordinary heroism in combat. If Dr. Chun was right, she was holding a medal that represented incredible courage and sacrifice. But Dr. Chun wasn't finished. "There's something else," he said, pointing to a small series of numbers engraved on the back of the medal that Sarah hadn't noticed before. "These appear to be identification numbers. If I'm right, we might be able to determine not just what this medal is, but who it was awarded to." Dr. Chun explained that he had contacts at the Department of Defense who specialized in tracking military decorations and their recipients. With Sarah's permission, he would forward the information to appropriate military historians who might be able to provide more definitive identification. Sarah left Wright-Patterson that afternoon with mixed emotions. She was thrilled to learn that her dumpster discovery was genuinely significant, but she was also beginning to understand the weight of responsibility that came with possessing such an important piece of someone's military service. If the medal could be traced to its original recipient, there might be family members who had wondered for decades what had happened to their loved one's decoration. A week passed without any word from Dr. Chun. Sarah continued her regular teaching duties, but found herself distracted by thoughts of the medal, which she had placed in a small display case on her desk at home. She researched Distinguished Service Cross recipients from Ohio, read accounts of the battles and campaigns where such medals were earned, and tried to imagine the story behind her particular discovery. Then, on a Wednesday morning in the third week of November, Sarah's classroom phone rang during her lunch break. She almost didn't answer, assuming it was a parent or administrative call that could wait until after school. But something made her pick up the receiver. "Is this Ms. Sarah Martinez?" asked a professional-sounding male voice. "Yes, this is Sarah." "Ms. Martinez, this is Colonel James Patterson calling from the Pentagon. I understand you recently discovered a military decoration that may be of interest to our office." Sarah nearly dropped the phone. The Pentagon was calling her classroom in small-town Ohio about a metal sheet found in a dumpster. She managed to confirm that yes, she had found what appeared to be a Distinguished Service Cross, and yes, she had been working with Dr. Chun at Wright-Patterson to research its origins. Colonel Patterson explained that Dr. Chun had forwarded the information about Sarah's discovery to the appropriate military archives, where historians had been able to match the medal's identification numbers to their records. What they had found was remarkable enough to warrant a personal call from the Pentagon. "Ms. Martinez," Colonel Patterson said, "the medal you found was awarded to First Lieutenant William Harrison of the 82nd Airborne Division on June 15, 1944, for extraordinary heroism during the D-Day landings in Normandy. Lieutenant Harrison was posthumously awarded the Distinguished Service Cross after he single-handedly held a strategic position against German counterattacks, allowing his unit to advance and ultimately saving the lives of over 30 American soldiers." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes as she listened to the story of incredible courage that her dumpster discovery represented. But Colonel Patterson wasn't finished. Lieutenant Harrison was killed in action 3 days after the award was approved. The medal was sent to his family in Ohio, but according to our records, his parents died in the 1970s without any surviving children. We had assumed the medal was lost to history. Your discovery has given us an opportunity to properly honor Lieutenant Harrison's sacrifice. The Pentagon, Colonel Patterson explained, was planning a ceremony to commemorate the 80th anniversary of D-Day. They wanted to include a tribute to forgotten heroes like Lieutenant Harrison, soldiers whose stories had been lost over time, but whose courage deserved to be remembered. Sarah's discovery of the medal had provided them with a tangible connection to one such hero. But there was more. Military historians had been able to trace Lieutenant Harrison's extended family tree and had located his great-nephew, Michael Harrison, who lived in California and had never known the full story of his great-uncle's service. The Pentagon wanted to present the medal to Michael Harrison during the commemoration ceremony, returning a piece of family history that had been lost for decades. Sarah listened in amazement as Colonel Patterson outlined the Pentagon's plans. They wanted to invite her to Washington, D.C. for the ceremony, recognizing her role in preserving an important piece of military history. They also wanted to arrange for her students to participate via video conference, giving them a chance to witness history being made and to understand the real-world impact of preserving the past. The phone call lasted nearly an hour, during which Colonel Patterson shared more details about Lieutenant Harrison's service and the significance of his Distinguished Service Cross. Sarah learned that Harrison had volunteered for the dangerous mission that earned him his medal, knowing that the odds of survival were slim, but understanding that someone had to hold the line against German forces that were threatening to overrun American positions. After the call ended, Sarah sat in her empty classroom, staring at the phone and trying to process what had just happened. 3 weeks ago, she had been taking out recycling and had noticed something metallic in a dumpster. Now the Pentagon was calling to tell her she had discovered a lost piece of American military history, a medal that represented extraordinary courage and sacrifice during one of the most important battles of World War II. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Sarah worked with Pentagon historians to learn more about Lieutenant Harrison's service and the circumstances that led to his medal being awarded. She coordinated with school administrators to arrange for her class to participate in the ceremony via video conference. She prepared lessons about D-Day, the 82nd Airborne Division, and the meaning of military decorations, using Lieutenant Harrison's story as a central focus. The ceremony took place on a cold December morning in Arlington National Cemetery. Sarah watched via video link as Colonel Patterson presented the Distinguished Service Cross to Michael Harrison, who wept as he learned the story of his great-uncle's heroism for the first time. Military historians spoke about the importance of preserving such artifacts and the ongoing effort to ensure that no veteran's sacrifice goes unremembered. Sarah's students watched in fascination as their teacher was recognized for her role in preserving military history. The Pentagon official who spoke at the ceremony emphasized that heroes come in many forms, including teachers who care enough to research a forgotten piece of metal instead of throwing it away. But perhaps the most meaningful part of the ceremony was when Michael Harrison spoke about his great-uncle. He explained that his family had always known that William Harrison had died in World War II, but they had never known the details of his service or the circumstances of his death. The discovery of the medal had given them not just a physical artifact, but a complete understanding of their relatives' courage and sacrifice. After the ceremony, Sarah received letters from military historians, veterans organizations, and other teachers who had been inspired by her story. The local newspaper wrote a feature article about her discovery, and the State Historical Society invited her to speak at their annual conference about the importance of preserving military artifacts. But the most significant impact was on Sarah's students. The experience of watching their teacher discover a piece of history and seeing it return to its rightful place had given them a new understanding of the importance of preserving the past. Several students began researching their own family military histories, while others started paying more attention to historical artifacts and stories in their own community. Sarah kept detailed records of her research process and created a curriculum unit based on her experience. She shared this with other teachers, showing them how a simple discovery could be turned into a comprehensive lesson about history, research methods, and the importance of honoring military service. The medal itself now sits in a place of honor in Michael Harrison's home, displayed alongside other family photographs and memorabilia. But its journey from a school dumpster to a Pentagon ceremony represents something larger than just one family's restored heritage. It demonstrates the power of curiosity, the importance of preserving history, and the incredible stories that can emerge when someone cares enough to look deeper than surface appearances. Sarah often thinks about the circumstances that led to her discovery. How had Lieutenant Harrison's Distinguished Service Cross ended up in a school dumpster? Had it been accidentally thrown away during a house cleaning? Had someone not understood its significance? The mystery may never be solved, but Sarah has learned that sometimes the most important discoveries happen when we least expect them. The experience changed Sarah's approach to teaching history. She now emphasizes to her students that historical artifacts are all around them, waiting to be discovered and understood. She encourages them to ask questions about old objects they encounter, to research unfamiliar items, and to understand that every piece of history has a story worth telling. Sarah's classroom now features a display case with replicas of various military decorations, along with the story of her discovery and research process. She uses Lieutenant Harrison's story to teach her students about World War II, about the importance of military service, and about the responsibility we all have to preserve and honor the sacrifices of previous generations. The Pentagon ceremony was broadcast to schools across the country, and Sarah has received invitations to speak at education conferences about incorporating historical research into elementary curricula. She has developed partnerships with local veterans organizations, military historians, and historical societies to bring more authentic experiences to her students. But perhaps most importantly, Sarah's story has inspired other teachers to pay attention to the historical artifacts that might be hiding in plain sight. She regularly receives emails from educators who have discovered interesting objects in their own schools or communities and want guidance on how to research their origins and significance. The Distinguished Service Cross that Sarah found in a dumpster has become a symbol of the importance of curiosity, research, and respect for military history. It represents the courage of Lieutenant William Harrison, who gave his life for his country, but it also represents the dedication of a teacher who cared enough to turn a chance discovery into a meaningful lesson about preserving the past. Sarah continues to teach 5th grade at Roosevelt Elementary, but her perspective on education has been permanently changed by her experience with Lieutenant Harrison's medal. She now understands that teaching history isn't just about dates and facts, but about connecting students to the real stories of real people who shaped the world they live in. The empty space in the school dumpster where Sarah first noticed the medal has been filled countless times since that October afternoon, but the impact of her discovery continues to ripple outward through her students, her community, and the broader network of educators and historians who have been inspired by her story. Sometimes the most significant discoveries happen in the most ordinary places, made by people who simply care enough to look closely and ask questions. Sarah Martinez's journey from finding a tarnished piece of metal to receiving a call from the Pentagon proves that curiosity and dedication can uncover extraordinary stories hiding in plain sight. This story was brought to you by the Silent Ranks. Before we leave you today, here's our question. Have you ever found something that seemed worthless at first but turned out to have incredible significance? Or do you know someone who preserved a piece of history that others might have thrown away? Tell us in the comments about the hidden treasures and forgotten stories that deserve to be remembered. And if you believe in the power of preserving history and honoring those who came before us, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We'll see you in the next one.